Hey, welcome back to Black Lab Garage. Today I've made another video for you on how to recurve your Duraspark distributor. I'll take it one step further because I've never seen one video on how to recurve your distributor and convert over to Duraspark ignition. I like Duraspark. Okay. This will work on up to, I think, a 76 model truck. I mean, technically it'll work on all of them, but there was the ignition switch changed, I think, in 77, and it had 2 wires running off of it, versus 76 back only had 1 wire running off of it. So, I mean, it'll work either way, but this is definitely applicable up to 76, I think. So, you ready? Let me show you how to do this. Come on, let's get into it. Alright, first thing we want to do is remove that little E-clip right there. And there we go. And if you drop it, I'll go ahead and tell you, at your local auto parts store, over in the help section, they usually have a pack of E-clips, and one of those in there does fit that. Now, let's take the vacuum advance loose. This is a reman distributor that I bought on eBay because, you know, my old truck still has points in it, which people knock points in condensers, but let me tell you something. If you put good points and a good condenser in it, like Blue Streaks or Napa's Etchlins, not Napa's Proformers, those are garbage, they're no better than what AutoZone sells, but like the Etchlin stuff, you're not going to have any problems out of them. The only reason that I'm changing over to electronic is just trying, I'm not saying we'll get there for sure, but trying to get more fuel mileage out of that 390. So we're actually going to know if changing to electronic ignition does increase fuel mileage, or if that's just an old wives' tale. Now, once you got the screws out, just kind of pry up gently on that arm. Well, there we go. Now let's talk about the vacuum advance for a minute. The vacuum advance, if you've got it hooked up to ported vacuum at idle, will give absolutely no advance to the timing. None. It's only when you crack the throttle open and that port on the carburetor gets exposed to vacuum, then it advances. Of course, if you hook it up to manifold vacuum, as soon as you crank the engine, or while it's even cranking, you'll have vacuum and it'll advance the timing then. There's pros and cons to each of them. Okay, I'm not getting into the argument over which one's better. I have done both, and I can tell you both work well when the distributor's set up right, but you have to set the distributor up specifically for them. Most Fords used ported vacuum. Now, can you see right here? See that number? Let me turn it around. Number 4. Okay. This one here. This is a number 12. Hard to get turned right. There. Number 12. That is the number of degrees of vacuum that this can pull in. Now you want to multiply that number times 2 to get how many crank degrees. This is how many cam degrees. This multiply times 2 to get how many crank degrees. So this one can pull 8 degrees of advance in at the crank. So that's not a whole lot. This is actually a pretty good canister right here. This one can pull 24. if you've got your initial set fairly low, I mean, because most Fords, especially in FEs, they only run like 6 initial or something. You know, some, not all of them, but some of them. This one right here would probably be a better choice. Okay, but then you get into the aftermarket ones, and they're adjustable. Usually, I think it's about a 1/16 of an inch Allen screw up in there. You can reach up in there and turn it to increase or decrease. Number one, it increases and decreases the amount of vacuum it takes to operate it. But, you know, and also it increases and decreases how much advance you can put into it. But I'm probably going to stick with this 4 for now, because I run quite a bit of initial advance. So we're going to stick with this one for now. And you will run into some of them, like this one, that has no number. Well, the only way to find out what that one has is you would have to hook it up, crank the engine, and get you a vacuum pump and apply vacuum to it and hold the timing light. And as you pump it up, watch the timing light and see how many degrees of advance it puts into it. That'll be the only way to tell what those are. So now we got that out of the way. You will see where your roll pin is. In this case it's right there, and you want to mark, because see there's a hole over here too. If I can get it in the line, there we go. There's a hole on each side, but one of them is slightly off more than the other, and if you put it on the wrong side, your rotor will be slightly out of phase from the cap, and you don't want to do that. So always mark it before you take it apart. So now I'll get 2 screwdrivers and pry this Reluctor up off there, or stat, or whatever you want to call it. Alright. Usually if the shaft's not rusty, they just come right up off there. Alright. Well, where'd the roll pin go? Huh. Was there not a roll pin in it? What about that? It ain't stuck to the magnet anywhere. I never noticed that. There must not have been a roll pin in that one. That's interesting. Okay. Now let's take these screws loose. Take this one loose. And you have to take the vacuum advance loose to be able to move this around to get to this other screw over here. Now once you have the screws loose, you can pick the whole thing up out of there. Now if you want to take this loose from the plate, there's a small round clip right there that you have to pry up out of there. Then you can separate this from the plate. And I may have to on this one. This one here is stiff. And maybe where it sets along that the grease got stiff in it. We'll have to, there we go, it's loosened up. Yeah, the grease got stiff in it. We'll have to oil it up good. Otherwise we'd have no advance. So you always want to check stuff like that. Yeah, a little 3-in-1 oil should be good as new. Now first thing, check to make sure that your advance is working. You know, check the mechanism, make sure it ain't froze up. This one's not. Now right down in here there's a little round wire clip. You gotta have a fine pair of needle nose to grab a hold of it, and even then it's still a pain. There we go, got it started. There it is. Once you have the clip out, you can unhook these springs. There we go. So I used a hook instead. That worked. Now you'll have one heavy spring and one light spring. And basically it depends on how fast you want the advance to come in as to what spring you want to replace, either or both. Okay, we got the springs loose. So now this here will slide up off here. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth. There we go. They had greased it. I don't know what they use for grease. Quickcrete, maybe. Alright, as you can see here, well, I can hold it right. I welded that slot up. So now I gotta grind it down and then measure it with a pair of calipers to see, make sure I've got the width of the slot right. I'll tell you what the widths are right here in a second. Alright, get this where you can see it. I stopped at 0.420, which 0.410 is a 10L slot, 0.436 is 11L, 12L is 0.462, 13L is 0.488, and 14L is 0.514. So I'm right over a 10, but not quite an 11. So, but that's plenty good enough, because between 10 and 12 really is what you want, because this will give me 20 degrees of mechanical, a 12 will give you 24 degrees of mechanical. That way, you know, if you run say 14 initial and your 20 degrees of mechanical, well, that's 34. Then add that in, you know, that's going to put us around 42, which, I mean, at high vacuum, you know, when your vacuum advance is working, you will go over like the 36 to 38 that most call for. I mean, that's common, you know, to go over 40, you know, some go as high as 50. So I mean, that's fine. But your initial and mechanical, you want to stay around 36 to 38, somewhere in there. So we're good now. So now we just got to put it back together. Alright, now there's the post that we have to go over. Make sure you got it turned to the right slot. In this case, it's our modified 16L, and you'll have to move the weights where it'll slide all the way down. And if yours is dry on grease in there, make sure you grease it. Use like some good silicone grease or something, and make sure it moves freely after it slides all the way down. Now you can put a sleeve or something over this post right here to limit its movement, which would help, you know, if you don't have a way to weld it or whatever, you can sleeve it, which will limit it also. So just throwing that out there, you can do that. Now it's time to get this little wire clip back in. Probably can't get it on camera, but basically you just have to push it back down over the shaft. Okay, I don't know if I can get my light down in there. You can see the two prongs sticking up right there. I got the clip back in. So now it can't come off. So now we need to put the springs back in. You'll have a light one and a heavy one, and remove the lighter one of the two. This is for a truck anyway. You'll get you some Mr. Gasket 925Ds and replace the lighter spring of the two with just one of these, because we don't want it coming in too fast, not in a truck, you know, it's going to do some pulling. Alright, now let's hook the heavy spring back up. It's kind of hard to do with my hands in a way, but now here's the thing, you don't want this spring tight, not the heavy one. You want to leave it kind of loose. You can see that in there is. Because the lighter one of the two determines your advance right off idle. Okay, it's the heavier one that comes in later, after the mechanical weights, you know, fully take over. Now hook the lighter one up. Now you want to make sure that there is tension on it, because if there's not, it will not. See how it's pulling it all the way back to the back of the slot? That's what you want. If you don't have tension on this lighter one, it might stick here or here, and your idle will be all over the place. So you've got to make sure that there is some tension on it. And you can adjust how much tension simply by bending these tabs in and out. That's actually how you can slow and speed up the timing curve. But let me show you what happens when you don't have enough tension on it, or when the weights are froze up. And this distributor here actually looks good, spins good. But look, see how it's stuck in the middle when it should be back here? But see, it's not returning where it should. So I guarantee this one's idle was all over the place, and the advance was probably all over the place. Alright, now time to put the plate back in. Let's see, go. Oh, there's some screw holes here somewhere. Okay, it doesn't go that way, so it goes this way. It'll only line up one way, so don't worry. Yep, just like that. And you want to put this one in first because you've got to put your pigtail back in under the other screw. Now slide it around. Put that back in. Now we can put the other screw in. Alright, we're in the home stretch here. Now there's our slot. Remember we put a mark on it? Oh, and I did find that roll pin. It was stuck to the end of one of the screwdrivers because I guess it was magnetic. I thought it didn't have one. Which, well, that wouldn't surprise me either. Not with rebuilt stuff. Okay. Line your mark and your slot up. And take your roll pin. And I always lay it on its back in this groove right here. And take a flat blade screwdriver. Just push that pin right down in there. After you get started, you'll have to tap it on in. Alright, roll pin is in. Now take the vacuum advance, finagle it through, pull this around, and hook that back up over it. Now, I always leave these loose till I get the E-clip back on. And the E-clip is fun because you've got a magnet right here that's always trying to pull it. So I lay it down kind of flat and take my small needle nose and pop it right on. Now finish tightening our vacuum advance now. I like how somebody's already stripped one of these, or started to strip one of the screws out before I even took it apart. That was nice of him. And with this, we now have a recurved Duraspark distributor. It was that easy. Now, I was talking about speeding up and slowing down the curve. What you do, you'll turn it. See a square hole right here? Turn it until you see the arm that holds the spring. You see it's lined up. Kind of hard to see because you need a light shine down in there. But you can take a small needle nose or a thin blade flat screwdriver and bend it out, which would slow it down, or bend it in, which would make it come in faster. And you want to do that on both sides. And that's how you speed up and slow down the curve. Basically just adjusting the tension on the spring is all you're doing. So now let's get this put in the truck. Now a couple things you're going to need for this conversion. Number one, we need an ignition module. Let me tell you something. The ignition modules is what gave Duraspark a bad name, because people go up AutoZone and buy one of their, I can remember when they were like $16. They're crap. They're absolute garbage. The only boxes that are in count are you can still buy the genuine Ford box, they're still for sale, or the standard ignition boxes are good. I've got one on my truck, my four-wheel drive truck, that's been on there for 13 years now, and it is a Borg-Warner Select, which is part of standard ignition. I found this one, new old stock. You know me, I like new old stock stuff. But since this truck had points on it, we got to find a place to mount it. And I'll probably mount the box right there, because you don't want to mount it, you know, down here somewhere, because you got your exhaust manifold right there. You want to keep it up out of the heat. Of course, I'll just put that's the harness for the lights there. I'll just run it down beside of it. Ain't no big deal. Now, some of them earlier ones, I think the original ones, didn't have these spacers cast into it. If you've got one of those, or if it's just flat right here, you want to put a spacer in between it. That way air can get underneath it and keep it cool. That's mainly what kills these boxes, is heat. But this one has them cast into it, so we ain't got to worry about it. We just need to mark the holes and drill it. Yeah, about right there. The other thing is, if you're using an original harness that you've scavenged from the junkyard, the coil doesn't have screw-on connections. It's got what they call a horseshoe collar. Let me show you. That is the horseshoe collar. Snaps on the coil. Now you can cut that off and put regular ends on it if you want, but I kind of like them. So, keeping with my new old stock theme, genuine new old stock Holly. See, it has those on it. That's even nice enough to include a new screw for the coil clamp. So let's get the box mounted and get the coil swapped out. Now let's lift our distributor cap off, see where the rotor's at. Okay, right there. So I'll make a mark down here on the power steering bracket so we know it's pointed in that direction. And loosen this bolt. Well, remove the bolt, I should say. And, dummy. Take the bracket off. There it goes. Now, before we drop this new distributor in, Put a little assembly lube on this gear. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, because I know there'll be some say, you're supposed to use that big distributor cap and the cap adapter. No, you don't have to. That small cap works, and rotor and stuff works just fine with the blue box. That big cap only came about because of the red box, which ran on a full 12 volts, which was California only. And they would crossfire in it because it ran on full 12 volts. But outside of that, the small cap works fine on all the others. It was just that one particular box that had to have the red, not all of them. It was the one particular red box that had to have the big cap, not all of them. Now let's try to drop this distributor back in. And rotor button should be pointed about right there. Nope. Yep, we're right. Although it ain't dropped down all the way, but that ain't no big deal. When that happens, just reach over here. Of course, don't do like I did and do that with it in gear. There you go. It's all the way down. Yeah. Make sure it's out of gear before you do that. It's a handy tip of the day. Now let's take our harness and start plugging it in. There's that. There'll be two wires that we have to run, and that'll be the hot and crank and hot and run. And they say you can actually just do away with one of them, but I want to do it like it says to do, and do both. Now, the original coil wire, I'm actually just going to tie in right in here. Mine still has the original ballast resistor in it that cuts the voltage down. So I'm just going to tie it in there. Actually, I had an even better idea. Rather than cut the wire, reaching this horseshoe connector here, pry that little tab up, and I'll just crimp that onto the end of that wire there. Nobody will ever know the difference. Yes, I like to solder my wires. I don't like crimp connectors. Matter of fact, I hate crimp connectors. So I'll check back in with you here in a second. Okay, the white wire on the ignition module, I ran over here to the S position on the starter solenoid. You can see I just put a crimp on ring terminal behind it and slid this one back on it. So that takes care of that one. Now I pulled the ignition switch out, and tested all of them until I found one that was run and hot, or hot and run. I'm dyslexic, I guess. Hot and run, which was this one right here. Now yours may be a different color, that's why I would suggest testing them to find the exact one that's hot and run. So I want to run this one to the red wire on the ignition module. This wire. Now make sure your vacuum advance is still unhooked, and let's see if it'll crank and set the timing on it. There's about 14 degrees before top dead center. I was going to have to take the distributor loose and move it to, so I think we're okay. It's close, but we're okay. Definitely more responsive than it was. Well, here I am road tripping it after changing that out. And let me tell you something, that really brought this old 390 alive. Made a big difference in it, in acceleration and stuff. So we'll still have to check it as far as mileage, but I can tell you for a fact, as far as acceleration, it made a big difference. So now let's go load this thing down again. Now check this out. You seen how hot it was running the other, I mean, it wasn't running hot, but I'm saying, you seen where the temperature hand was at the other day when I drove it, and it was colder that day than it is today. Look at it. Even recurving the distributor actually making it run cooler now. Well, I'm loaded up with more hay again. Let me tell you something. Recurving this distributor, hey, it's like night and day difference. If you've never done it, I don't care if it's a FE or 460, 429, 351, whatever. If you ain't done it, you need to do it. You'll be amazed how much difference it makes. Well, made it back. Let me just tell you, if you've not gotten it by now, if you have not recurved your distributor, you need to do it. I'm telling you, it makes a night and day difference in how your engine will run. Or it has in this one anyway. So next thing we need to do is check the mileage, see if mileage went up or down because of it making more power. Should go up, especially with the engine running cooler. That really surprised me that it runs cooler. But anyway, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. Me and the pups, we really do appreciate you. Each and every one of you, and I mean that. So stay tuned. I'll be back with another one. See you.